Welcome to the Extraordinary Podcast, where we identify God's uncommon work in common life. Recognizing God's work requires intentionality, but articulating it motivates and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe to never miss an episode. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Edwin Schertz, where he shares about his life as an adult before Jesus and how Jesus came and transformed him, gave him hope, gave him joy, and gave him purpose. So let's get into the conversation today. Edwin, thank you for taking time to share with us a little bit about your story and just being a guest on our podcast. So thank you.
You're welcome.
As we begin, could you share a little bit about your career path and particularly where you are now and just your career path? Let's go there.
My first job I ever had was with my grandfather. I delivered newspapers for the Burlington Hawkeye. And the thing I liked about that was when we get there and then we'd have to move his car. So we'd get in his car and drive it a couple blocks, so that way when he got done with his portion, we could pick it up and stuff. So it all started there. And then I went into the grocery retail business. I sacked groceries at Eagle Groceries here in town, and they're no longer around. And then from there, I went to a bowling alley, and I was like the pin setter, the maintenance guy on the bowling, and people would plug their bowling balls, and I would router them. And so early on, I got onto the lathe, the lathe, and working the bowling balls and smoothing them. So it kind of started there, but then, I had a lot of jobs in the construction and everything, and then when I went into the military right after high school, and that's where my career path really started. I was around semis. 2.5 ton trucks and bigger was everything that I worked on in the military. So from the age of 19 until now, I've been around trucks, big trucks, and I've always been fascinated with big trucks because when I was a kid, my uncles, my dad's two brothers were truck drivers, and they were always gone, but then they would come home with their big semis. And one of my earliest memories of a kid was my uncle came to my dad's and stayed, and he had his big semi out front, and I got to get in the truck and sit there and look at all the buttons, and I was just fascinated. And now, I don't know, I just feel comfortable in a big truck. I went over the road for several years, and I got to see the country, and I didn't have to spend travel expenses. That was really cool, getting to see everything around the country. And
do you have a few favorite spots or landmarks?
I love the Black Hills in South Dakota, Wyoming. I got to see Crazy Horse, that statue that they're building. I didn't get to see Mount Rushmore, but when I went through there, I got to see bighorn sheep cross the highway, and I mean, it stopped me dead in my tracks in my semi. I'm loaded, heading to Rapid City, South Dakota, out of Cheyenne, Wyoming was where I stopped the night before, and I was coming in, and that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And I've been clear to Delaware. My dad got to ride with me in the semi a few times. That was really nice, out towards Pennsylvania and seeing the what they call Long Island, New York. I got to see it, so that was always a dream of mine. Now, you drove a truck for several years. Yes.
You're no longer driving a truck.
Well, I am. I'm not driving a semi, so to speak. I still have a Class A CDL. I just got it reinstated, and I'm driving for a company here in town called Ideal. I'm driving a cement mixer.
But for a while, you weren't able to drive it.
No. In 2019, I caught COVID, and I'm a type 2 diabetic, so my eating habits have to be monitored. I have to not so much count my calories, but I got to watch my carbohydrate intake because carbs turn into sugar. And so in 2019, I caught COVID, and I was on oxygen for 2 weeks, and I think if I wouldn't have had the oxygen, I might not be here today. So my Class A CDL, so my insurance company, I don't know if you're familiar with the FMLA, but FMLA is the Family Medical Leave Act. And what the Family Medical Leave Act says, you as a company owner, a business, has the right to hold my position as an employee for 12 weeks when I have a medical condition that needs to be taken care of. And so I did an A1C test, and my sugars were really high. And COVID they kind of shut down everything to where you couldn't get into the doctors. So the insurance company only pays for an A1C test once every 3 months. Okay, and that's 12 weeks on a good day. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't, it was August, and I couldn't get back into the doctor till the end of January. So it was 4 months. And so I called my company and I asked them, I was like, here's the deal. And then that's where they explained to the FMLA to me. And I said, well, I'm going to have to resign. And so to make a long story short, my Class A CDL got reduced down to a regular driver's license. And I took a job with a local construction company. And instead of delivering the concrete, I was on the receiving end. And I was standing in there with sweat, tears, and working with everybody. And it's laborsome.
Well, I bring that up because I know you really enjoy driving a truck, and that was a difficult thing for you to do, to step away from that.
It was. It's not so much the money, because I get paid better driving a truck. The money is a lot better, but I feel more free inside the truck because I don't know, I sit above everything and I get to look down and I'm alone, so I get to spend a lot of time with myself and my thoughts. And now that I have the Jesus in my heart, I get to spend time talking to him. And I can put my phone, I got an earbud, I'll put an earbud in and I'll listen to my Pandora. I'll go to Crowder Station or Zach Williams. So I get the thing about driving a truck is it's just me and the road and that vehicle. So it kind of gives you a sense of empowerment, and I don't know, it's just the big trucks. And ever since I was a little kid, we'd sit and push them, back them up into underneath the chairs and underneath the table and drive around the table. And we'd annoy Grandma and Grandpa and Mom and Dad.
Now you mentioned that you now have Jesus. You came to know Jesus as an adult. Can you share that story?
There's a gentleman that goes to church here, Mark, and he worked at Hy-Vee at the time, and that's where my father and I frequently shopped, and Mark was right there at the produce, right where you walk in, and Mark found out that I was a hunter, because I hunt also. It's a passion of mine. And so Mark talked to me, and I always seen that Mark, he had a different kind of style about him, and him and I got to talking, and he talked about Jesus, and he says, I'm not going to push it on you. He says, but maybe you should think about coming to Jesus. And so I think like a year went by, and I finally came to Mark one time, and I said, I think I'm ready. What do I do? So Mark came to my house. I got saved. I didn't want to do this. And from that moment that Mark sat there and did the prayer with me, I felt relief. There's a lot to my story that I'm leaving out. I had a troubled past, but things changed that day for the better, and I don't know, I found happiness by saying yes to the Lord, because my whole life I thought, man, I got this. And we all tend to lean towards that first, and it was 9 years ago, I believe. I think it was around 2014. Mark knows the exact date. I don't, but most of my life I've been worldly, and now I'm trying to walk that narrow path and live more by faith, and I struggle. I'm not gonna lie, I struggle with it, and I try to be more obedient to what he's saying to me. There's a lot of times I get so caught up with what's going on, I don't hear what I think God is trying to say to me. But coming to God was just, I mean, it was an eye-opening experience, and I have calluses removed from my heart, and now I have a more sensitive side, a more loving and caring side that I didn't have before. And I thought the world was crap, and I just didn't want to associate with anybody because I'd been stepped on and walked on and treated bad and took advantage of. But coming to Jesus was, I don't know, it's one of the greatest things. The year that I came to Jesus, I make my own hunting calls, okay? And I started 2 years prior, okay, to me coming to Jesus. And the year that I came to Jesus, I won the Iowa State Turkey Calling Championship using calls that I made myself. I shot the biggest deer of my life, and I found Jesus. And Jesus works in threes. That's 3 things that happened that year that, 3 in 1, the triune and all that. I mean, there's so much that I have learned since then about the threes, the prospect of threes. And that's a whole nother thing. I could go on and on about that, but yeah.
Well, one of the things I'm curious to get your perspective on is you came to know Jesus as an adult.
Yes.
And I'm someone who grew up in the church. There's a lot of people that are listening that grew up in the church. Can you share some things that maybe were difficult or things you noticed or frustrations as somebody, as an adult that came to know Jesus that you had to work through? Can I share an example, or you?
Yeah. Please.
So here's kind of a trivial example. I'm sure when you came to know Jesus, you were just on fire, excited for life, and you would encounter these other followers of Jesus that were kind of just,
Yeah.
Like they didn't share the same passion or enthusiasm.
Right. Like the Bible says, they were lukewarm.
Exactly.
And I was on fire when I first came to Jesus. I mean, I'm still on fire. But my father passed away a year ago this past March, and I've been struggling since then. And I need to get back to that fire, And I know with the help that you guys give, and we got the men's group here, I need to get more actively involved with that. I need to get back to where I was, and I've stumbled, So the one thing that I know, before I used to get angry easily, and I used to settle a lot of things with my actions, if you know what I'm saying. It was, if I couldn't win you with my words, I would try to win you with punishment, And now that I have Jesus, I'm not like that no more. I mean, I'm going to try and portray what he did. I've been watching a lot of The Chosen. That's a good show. Passion of Christ, I've watched that. I mean, I bawled on that show. But as an adult, I mean, I lived most of my life, Pastor, on my own, doing it on my own, I lost my mom at a young age, and I didn't know Jesus then, and I went down the wrong path, and I did things on my own, I always, I shut the world out, and I was just like, well, it's all about me, it's all about me. And there's the one thing that a guy told me when I first came to Christ, I first started coming to this church, was, Edwin, it's simple. He says, the word joy is how you should conduct yourself on a daily basis. And I was like, joy? I said, it's hard to be happy. He says, I'm not talking about happiness. He says, I'm talking about joy. He says, break it down as what is the anonym or an anagram? It's the letters, they mean something. Joy is Joy. So you put Jesus first, others second, and yourself last. That show, The Chosen, talked about put away your worldly things and follow me. Put yourself last. And I still struggle with that. I mean, it's hard to just say no. That I don't need that, because I have that inside me, like, wow, that bright glitter, it attracts you. It's tough. But
well, one of the things you mentioned is that there are times that you stumble or not perfect. I can't remember exactly what you said, but we're on a journey with Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? We all are.
Yes.
And we all have different things that can hinder us or cause us to stumble. Can you speak to what it means for you to be on a journey with Jesus?
It means that my life has direction and purpose. I used to question everything, like, where am I going? What about me? What about me? What about me? And now it's not so much about me anymore. I mean, I've got a wonderful wife in my life now, and I don't have any children of my own, but I've got daycare kids that I've known ever since they were little, and they call me Papa, and it gives me a sense of joy. So this journey with Jesus in my life right now, it's a blessing, to say the least. God didn't per se give me children of my own, but I've got so many children that look up to me and think that I can't do any wrong. And then I look at myself in the mirror and I see I have a problem looking past what I've been, I tell everybody the reason the rearview mirror is so small is because God doesn't want you to focus on there. He wants you to look at the big picture that's in front of you and face that. And these kids don't, they don't have that abstract thought like we do as adults. And when I see their joy about me, it brightens my day. I'm not gonna lie, it does. Like my grandson Theo tonight, I got home and Josie has brought him by Josie's my wife. Josie brought him by the work, and I was in the big end loader scooping rock and stuff, and he was like, my papa. And he got to see my work trucks, and now he's got these little construction vehicles. And tonight when I got off work, you and I were collaborating on how, getting here, and I was like, okay, this time, I got a time constraint. And I wanted to get cleaned up, and he wanted to play dump and tracks and trucks. And so I had to sit and take time for him. And before Jesus, no, I got to do this, and I didn't care if he cried or not. That's that type of person I was. But now it's like I got to take time to make the little things important. And you as a father, it's different. The one thing I envy you and all the other dads is you have created a life, and I don't know that joy. I probably never will. But I get to experience joy in all these little ones' lives, and their parents love me for it,
Yeah, little kids are precious, they're innocent, and their love is pure.
It is. And the things that they say sometimes, sometimes it melts your heart, and sometimes you're like, no, where did that come from?
Yep. Well, switching gears just a little bit, you mentioned you make your own turkey calls.
Yes.
Could you tell us about that?
When I got out of the military, when I was 21, 22, somewhere around there, I was in Germany, and I was an alcoholic, and I lived by the bottle. I'd be at the bar every night. If I ran out of money, I'd go home. If I still had money in my pocket, I was there till the bar closed, and that was my life back then. Partying and getting all messed up. And in 2001, I woke up in jail, and I said, you know what? No more. I'm done with this. And so I took up hunting, and I shot my first deer with antlers, and I mean, I was passionate. And a friend of mine that he's married to my cousin. He came over, we was having supper, and he's kind of like the primitive style person. He likes to nap arrowheads and make arrowheads and stuff. So he come over and he was talking about, I'm going turkey hunting next spring. I'm going to do it because we talked hunting all the time. We'd come over and have supper together, and we talked hunting. watch hunting shows because I shot this deer, and I mean I was on fire about it. And he says, I'm gonna go turkey hunting. I was like, so I'd go to Hy-Vee and get a bigger turkey. You know, I go to Walmart and get a 24-pound turkey for a lot less, and I ain't gotta sit out in the woods and do this and do that. And he's like, no, it's not about that. It's not about that. And he had this turkey call in his hand, and he's all, burp, burp, burp. And I said, nah, I still ain't interested. And so we ate supper and stuff, and he pulled that turkey call back out, and he started running it and stuff. We were sitting there talking and watching another hunting show. And I said, well, let me see it. Let me see it. And he put it in my hand. I was like, what do I do? And I started working that thing. And I was like, well, there might be something to this. So I went out and bought the same call he's got, you know. And in the spring, my dad and I love to go walking in arrowheads. And we'd go out in the woods and look for the antlers. Because after January or something, the deer, their antlers would fall off. And they call them sheds. So we would go looking for sheds. And we were out looking for sheds, and I always carried like a pouch so I could put my rocks and stuff or whatever I found into them, and I had the turkey call with me. And we're on this public property, and I would say half a mile to a mile away, 3/4 of a mile. I'm not sure on the exact distance, but it was real faint. I heard this, the gobble of the turkey. And I told my dad and my buddy, I said, hey, I'm going to try and get these birds fired up. So I got that call, and you know, I didn't really know Adam from Steve at that point, you know. And I was like, this is so cool. It's like my dad was like, come on, we're shed hunting. I want to shed hunt. And I was like, come on, Dad, just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. So I sat there, and I called that whole flock of turkeys. I sat there for about 10 minutes and got them gobbling. And finally I said, all right, Dad, let's go back to shed hunting. And we started to walk. And next thing I know, just on the other side of this little knoll, I mean, it was loud. My heart started racing. So I went turkey hunting and I killed my bird. And like I said, the guy that got me into this, he was primitive. He says, I want to make a wing bone out of the birds you shot. And I said, well, let's Google it. I'm the type of person, I think about it. And if I want to do it, I'll do research, and I just don't dive in, because I learned in the past you make a lot of mistakes that way, and I try not to make mistakes. And even though I research and stuff, I still have to work through the failures. Mm-hmm. Like Thomas Edison took 5,000 tries to make the light bulb, right? I think that's the number, but anyway, it's a lot. He experimented a lot. So we made wing bone calls out of chicken wings. We practiced with them, and the first thing I found out that bones are fragile. So we took my turkey bones and we made wing bones, and you that's how you make them sound like a turkey. You hollow them out and you boil them, clean them, and then you glue them together. And it's that, you know, the drumstick when you're eating a chicken wing. You take that bone, and then the one that has the two bones. Them are the three parts you need to make a wing bone call. So I started making wing bone calls, and then my cousin's husband, on my mom's side, we were at a family dinner, and I had my wing bone because I was into it, you know. And I went and I showed him, look what I did. Well, he was a member of the NWTF, and that's the National Wild Turkey Federation, and it's a nonprofit organization that raises money to further the conservation efforts for the wild turkey. And he's like, dude, you got to make me some of them wing bone calls for our banquet. We'll auction them off. And I was like, well, I don't have a surplus. So he got me a big bag of bones. And I made 12 or 13 calls with the NWTF. And I got with them and I got started. And then another friend of mine is like, man, Edwin, he says, you kind of got something here, you know. And I think them first wing bones, I mean, if I look back at it, it's like, whoa, I made that? That's so ugly. But they raised, those wing bones raised that night of that auction $800 to $900 for them, you know. I was like, wow, this is kind of neat. So my buddy said, you ought to open up your own business, you know. And I was like, well. So I canceled a 401k. I had about $15,000 into a 401k, and I lost part of it because I took it out early. But that's allowed me to have a funding to where I built my shop, I bought my equipment. And so I started making my own calls. I started turning the round friction calls on a wood lathe. I make them out of wood. And since then, that was 2012 when all that's transpired. So for that first 10 years of my hunting, it built up to this, to that. And I told my buddy, I said, well, I don't know what to call my thing. If I'm going to be doing this, I got to have a name. And he says, well, you started out making wing bones. Why don't you call it Mr. Wingbones Calls? And so I looked it up on the internet, and there was nobody. There was a lot of wingbone things, but there was nothing saying Mr. Wingbones Calls. That entity was free. It was for the taking. So that's how Mr. Wingbones came to be.
Well, that's fun. And anything you look back on, you said the first ones that you made were primitive, but that's how it always is. And,
it is.
And so the calls you make are beautiful, and they're interesting. I'd never seen a turkey call like that until I met you. It's
awesome that you find excitement about it. Something that I do.
But it started out as a passion, and then it grew, and so
right.
it's something you just enjoyed, that you were interested in, which is fun, and it's still a passion of yours.
Yes.
And if you get to make an extra couple of bucks, awesome.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So
yes.
That's great.
It helps further my my goals and my plans for the house to improve the house, because the one thing my father and my grandfather always told me was, try to leave it better than you found it. Mm-hmm. So that's one of my goals in life, and now, is try to leave it better than I found it.
And you've been doing a lot of work on the house.
Yes, I have. Yeah. I inherited my father's house after he passed, and we went and got a loan, and I've put $45,000-$50,000 into the house right now. I just built my own deck on the front of the house. That's the first deck I've ever built, and so far all the neighbors are like, wow, dude, it totally transforms the house. And this past weekend, I built a nice little flower box, and we put flowers in it for my wife.
Yeah.
And so
that's fun.
It's nice when you do it. I know you. How's it go? You're not going to get to heaven by your works, but I find joy when I build something like that, and other people are like, that makes a guy feel good.
Yep. That's good. That's good. Well, Edwin, thank you for being a guest on our podcast. We appreciate you taking time to share with us and allowing Jesus to use your story. So thank you for being here.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Be on the lookout for how God does uncommon work in common life. And please subscribe to never miss an episode.